Ehi compare, ci può suonare, chi si suona.
So welcome to our episode on power posing. Power posing is a technique that was developed and researched by Dr. Amy Cuddy from Harvard University just a few short years ago. And I highly encourage you to see her TED Talk on the subject, which is one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. So today we're going to learn how to use body position and movement to lower our stress response, to actually lower one of our more significant stress hormones, cortisol, and to increase our presence and confidence by elevating our testosterone. This puts us in the what we might call the hormonal sweet spot for good behavior. So, in short, today we're going to learn how to use body position to improve our behavior. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we've used the technique, and then I will give you a demonstration. The first one I think is pretty interesting. We run a statewide crisis service here in Vermont, and we had a young fellow with autism who came into the crisis bed and was really struggling and was quite aggressive. And so the first day he was in the crisis bed, when we did his intake, he ended up getting aggressive and breaking some things in the building, and we had to intervene. So we know he had the capacity for violence. Because of that, he was not going to end up staying in the crisis bed, nor was he going to end up going home. He had attacked his mother's fairly severely a number of times, and no one felt like it was safe for him to return. So we were going to put him in a different home placement with some home providers. And so over the course of a couple of weeks, I got to know him a little bit. And, he was quite avoidant, pretty resistant to talking, fairly fearful and all of that. So when we got close to his placement and he wasn't going to go home, I wanted to make sure that I got him that information while he was at the crisis bed, so that if there was an explosion, it would happen with us and not happen in the new home. And so I went to see him, and of course he's being avoidant. What he's doing is playing video games, and he doesn't want to engage, and he's a teenager as well as everything else. And so I go see him and I say, I need to give you some information about what's going to happen when you leave. And he said, no, thank you. Not exactly in those words. And I said, well, all right, I'll give you a little time and then I'll come back. But there really is information I need to give you before you leave here. And that was the end of it. And I came back again, gave him a little while, and I said, okay, I have this information I need to give you. And he said, again, no, thank you, in slightly different words. And so I said, okay, well, I'll give you 2 more minutes to play a video game. Then I'm coming back and we're shutting off the video games and we're going to have a conversation. So I do that and I come back in the 2 minutes and I say, time to shut off the video games. He says no. And I say, well, we're going to shut them off. So it's up to you. I mean, you can shut them off if you like, or I'll shut them off. But we could need to have this conversation. So he spikes a little bit in his arousal and gets a little angry, but he does end up shutting the game system off. And I say, well, I got some bad news for you. You're not going to go home. You're going to go into a new place to live with some new people. And he said, why? And I said, well, what do you think? And he said, because I get angry. And I said, well, it's not really because you get angry, because everybody gets angry. The problem is when you get angry, you don't know what to do about it. And he said, what can I do? And I said, well, let me show you this technique called power posing. And so we went through. He was a little bit resistant, but once he got to doing it, he was fine with it. And it's pretty simple, so it was easy to do. And at the end of that time, at the end of the technique, he turned to me and said, what did you do to my body? He felt so different internally. And it really changed his behavior entirely, because I assumed we'd have the conversation. I assumed he'd get angry. I assumed he might get violent. He didn't. And then I assumed he'd go back to his video games. And in fact, he was not interested in the video games at that point. His body was so relaxed that he felt confident in engaging with me. And he asked me to read him a story. And so he went and got a bunch of storybooks, the Berenstain Bears, of course. And we sat together and read 10 books. And, probably halfway through the second or third one, he had his head on my shoulder, and we were just comfortably reading. So it was very sweet, and he made a very nice transition, actually, to the new home. And power posing is something that he's used regularly, along with some of the other techniques. I have just one more example, and this was interesting because the young lady, I'd only seen her a few times, and she was had cerebral palsy, so her body was sort of spastic and tight, and she had a difficult time stretching out. So fortunately enough, she came with a couple staff people and her home provider, and when we tried to do the power posing, the two young ladies who were with her, her aides, helped her to get into those positions, which she couldn't naturally do. And so it was really nice because they had to do it slowly in order to stretch her out comfortably. At the end of the couple of minutes of power posing, she was really quite relaxed. That was great. And so she came back to see me in a couple weeks, and I said how it had been going, and she had a few episodes of sort of outbursts. And I said, did you use the power posing? She said, no, that doesn't work. And the home provider agreed. She said, yeah, it really doesn't work for her. But I'd seen it work for her, So I said, so how did you do it? And the home provider said, well, I just told her to power pose. Well, she can't. She couldn't get her body into the right position in order to make herself feel calm. So again, we did the power posing at the office with me, with some assistance, and got her into these wide open and expansive positions, which was not easy for her to do, which she couldn't do on her own. And again, the feelings of calm and security and safety came in, and she was really did quite well. So those are the two examples. And now I will tell you, I'll give you a demonstration of the technique. And then we'll come back and I'll give you an overview of some of my favorite research on the topic, which is quite controversial, actually. And then at the website, you'll find all of the research you'd like. So let me give you a demonstration. Now, there's a couple things I want to bring up, and this is really true for all techniques. There are a number of channels in which we're feeding information to other people and to ourselves. One is this body position. But the second is movement, how we get into that body position. The third is our affect, what we look like. And I don't think you have to put on a big smile, but you have to have a positive affect on your face, confidence, presence. And the last thing is your voice. So low and slow is the rule. And all of that then feeds information back to the body and to other people and helps them to feel calm, which then helps them to behave better. Okay, so here we go. So we'll put one hand out to the right, palm up, other hand out to the side, palm up, then we'll put our chin up, chest out, and we'll all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you bring your hands back to the chest. One hand straight up, palm up. The other hand straight up, palm up. And again, chin up, chest out, and we all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hands to the arms of the chair. Push straight up. And we'll basically repeat what we just did sitting down. One hand out to the side, palm up. The other hand out to the side, palm up. Chin up, chest out, and we all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hands back to the chest. One hand straight up, palm up. The other hand straight up, palm up. Chin up, chest out, and we all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hands to the hips, into the Wonder Woman position, chin up, chest out, and we all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then hands together behind the back. Pull your hands straight down. shoulders back, chin up, chest out, and we all count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And return to the seat. And it's important at this point to take a minute or so, at least a half a minute, and just sit and appreciate what it's done for your body. Close your eyes if you like. Minimizes distractions, obviously. So one final thing about the technique. You notice I say we all count to 5 together. This is a social, it turns out when you look at the research that some of the benefit of this is that it happens socially. So it's important to do this not alone but with other people. And so, power pose on. Okay, so now let me tell you a little bit about my favorite research on power posing. It begins with this notion that you're putting your body in certain positions changes your physiological state, which allows you to behave differently. And since we're concerned about behavior, that's the most important thing. So one of the interesting things is this whole notion, and you saw it when we did the demonstration, the hands were out. Well, if you think about the victory display, it's also called the pride display. What does that do for you? Well, what it actually does is increases your testosterone. So you've been challenged, you win something, and by the way, even congenitally blind people who've never seen anybody do this exact action. And what it does is maintains your testosterone level high enough so that if there's an additional challenge, you're ready for it. There's lots of controversy about this power posing research, and most of it really is about replicability of the studies. So I'm going to tell you some of the studies, but I'll tell you in advance that a number of them, particularly Amy Cuddy studies, have been hard to replicate. And there's lots of reasons for that, and one of them is maybe that the way the studies were done. So Amy Cuddy's studies involve, there's a social component to them, and people don't know in advance what they're trying to find, what they're trying to do, what the hypothesis of the study is. So they're just told, do this, versus this is going to increase your testosterone, right? So anyway, I still think that there are quite a few studies that lead up to the Amy Cuddy study. So like most of science, it's built on the shoulders of other research. And so there's about 33 studies about body position that lead to the Amy Cuddy studies. And they include changes, and they involve probably 2,500 people. And like I said, 33 studies, and they involve, they found things like increased confidence, increased pain tolerance, increased feelings of power, improved mood, more persistence, less fear, and things like that. So there's a pretty substantial base upon which she builds her research. And the other bit of research which really supports the hormonal findings is that the Cobra pose in yoga, in which you're certainly not going to do it for you, but you're from your waist to your legs is on the floor, and then your body is extended up, again with the chin up, chest out, and that extension. When they did hormonal measurements of the Cobra pose, and I think it's about 4 minutes of Cobra pose, what they found is about a 16% increase in testosterone and an 11% decrease in cortisol. So increased dominance hormone, increased persistence, increased presence because of your higher testosterone, and lower stress response because of your reduced cortisol, lower reactivity. That's almost exactly what they find in the power posing studies. So again, let's credence to Amy Cuddy's studies. And so what she did was, and here again is something really interesting. It's only 2 poses, and it's only 2 minutes. Not very long to get very significant internal physiological changes. So what she did was put people in 2 power poses for 1 minute each. So low power poses look something like folded up, not expansive, head down, or covering the neck and things like that. And high power poses were these open and expansive poses. And so what they found is that in the low power pose position, you got about a 15% increase in cortisol and about a 10% drop in testosterone. So the opposite of the hormonal sweet spot, right? And in high power poses, you got about a 25% decrease in cortisol. So stress hormone is way down, and about a 20% increase in testosterone. So overall, the difference between high and low power posers is about 40% on cortisol, about a 40% difference, and about 30% difference on testosterone. It's very significant and obviously has a huge impact on people's behavior. They also found that the people who did the high power poses were more tolerant of risk. They were more willing to gamble away and do things like that. And they expressed feelings of power, more positive feelings of power. And then the follow-up study, I think, is also a very interesting study, because what she wants to find out is how do these internal physiological changes play out in the real world, which is the important part of it. And so what she does is put people in high or low power positions and then put them in a very stressful situation, and then look at the effects of the power posing on the stressful situation and the outcome. And so you have high or low power positions, and she puts people into stressful job interviews. And what's so stressful about the job interview is that the person who does the interviewing is trained to give them absolutely no feedback. So it's just a blank face. And that, of course, is very stressful, drives your heart rate, blood pressure up. There's all kinds of research and data on that. And they look at who did best in terms of the job interview based on what positions they were put in. And, of course, what they found was that the people who were most successful, I'm sorry, let me take a step back here and say that an independent group of judges who watched the video of this interview made the judgments about who they would hire. And they were blind to both what power positions people were in. And what they did, of course, was found the people who were in the high power positions as the most hireable. And so, again, good research. We'll post at the Vermont, at tamingthetigervt.com a more complete bibliography that will include the 33 studies we talked about, and also some of the studies that were not replicated and some of their thoughts on the subject. So, power pose on.